My sister said I couldn't bring my black boyfriend to Thanksgiving because it would upset Grandma. I brought him anyway. Grandma hugged him first. The steering wheel felt slick and cold under my sweating palms. Every mile marker we passed on the interstate seemed to count down to a detonation. Beside me, Michael was a picture of calm, his hand resting gently on my knee, his thumb drawing slow, reassuring circles. He was humming along to the radio, a low, bluesy tune that was the complete opposite of the frantic thrashing in my chest. He didn't understand. He couldn't. He thought we were just going to a slightly awkward Thanksgiving dinner. I knew we were driving into an ambush, and my own sister was the one who had set the trap. Clara's voice from the phone call 2 nights ago was still echoing in my head, a corrosive whisper of faux concern. "Sarah, you can't," she had said, her tone dripping with that practiced, patronizing sympathy she used whenever she was about to bring the hammer down. "You can't bring Michael. It's just not a good idea." I had asked why not. He was my boyfriend of 8 months. I loved him. The family had to meet him eventually. "It's Grandma." She'd sighed, the sound crackling with manufactured regret. "You know how she is. From a different time. A black man at her Thanksgiving table. It would just be too much for her. It would upset her terribly. Let's not ruin the holiday for everyone just to make a point." Every word was a carefully chosen poison dart. "You know how she is." A phrase designed to make me complicit in a bigotry I had never once witnessed in our grandmother. A different time. The classic, cowardly excuse. Ruin the holiday for everyone. Placing the blame squarely on my shoulders for any ugliness that might occur. And the final, twisting knife. Just to make a point. As if my love for Michael, the kindest and most stable thing in my life, was nothing more than a political statement. I had hung up the phone, my hand trembling, not with sadness, but with a cold, clarifying rage. Clara wasn't protecting Grandma. She was using her as a shield. So here we were, pulling into the long, gravel driveway of the house I grew up in, the house where Grandma Eleanor still lived. The big oak tree in the front yard was bare, its skeletal branches stark against the gray November sky. It looked just how I felt. Stripped down, exposed, and ready for a storm. "You okay, babe?" Michael asked, his voice cutting through my internal monologue. "You've been quiet for the last 20 miles. I forced a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "Just pre-holiday jitters. Big family. Lots of questions. You know the drill." He squeezed my knee. "Don't worry. I'm a professional charmer. They're going to love me." I prayed he was right. I prayed that the one person Clara claimed would be horrified would prove her wrong. It felt like everything was riding on that one moment. As we walked up the familiar flagstone path, the front door swung open before we even reached the porch. It was Clara, of course. She stood there, blocking the entrance, her arms crossed over her chest. She had a tight, thin smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. It was her, "I'm being reasonable, but you're forcing my hand" look. She completely ignored Michael, her gaze fixed on me. "Sarah, can I talk to you for a second? Alone." It wasn't a question. It was a command. The air, already cold, dropped another 10 degrees. "No, Clara," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I took a step forward, putting myself slightly in front of Michael, a protective instinct I hadn't realized I had. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it to both of us. This is Michael." I gestured to him, my hand a little shaky. Michael, ever the gentleman, extended his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Clara. Sarah's told me so much about you." Clara looked at his outstretched hand as if it were a venomous snake. She didn't take it. The moment stretched into a painful, suffocating silence. "I told you not to bring him," she hissed, her voice low and furious. The mask of civility was gone. "I warned you. I told you what this would do to Grandma. Why are you so determined to be selfish? Why do you always have to create drama?" My rage, which had been simmering for 2 days, finally boiled over. "The only one creating drama here is you, Clara. Now, are you going to let us in? Or are we going to have Thanksgiving dinner on the doorstep?" I pushed past her, gently pulling Michael with me into the warmth of the entryway. The familiar smell of roasting turkey and cinnamon filled the air, a scent of home that suddenly felt alien and hostile. The house was buzzing with the low hum of family chatter. I could see cousins and aunts milling around in the living room. And then I saw her. Grandma Eleanor was sitting in her favorite armchair by the fireplace, a colorful afghan draped over her lap. She looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. They found me immediately, and then shifted to the tall man standing beside me. Clara was right behind us, radiating a triumphant malice. This was it. This was the moment she had engineered. She was waiting for the explosion, for Grandma's shock and distress, the proof that she had been right all along. Grandma looked at Michael. Her expression was unreadable for a beat. Then, a slow, wide smile spread across her face, crinkling the corners of her eyes. With a strength that surprised me, she pushed herself up from the chair. She bypassed me completely, her focus entirely on him. She walked right up to Michael, her small, bird-like frame seeming tiny next to his 6'3" height. She reached up, took his face in her wrinkled hands, and pulled him down for a hug, planting a loud, smacking kiss on his cheek. "Well, it's about time," she said, her voice clear and strong, ringing through the suddenly silent house. I was beginning to think my Sarah had no taste at all. "You must be Michael." "I'm Eleanor. Welcome to our family." The collective gasp in the room was almost comical. I turned to look at Clara. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her jaw was slack, her eyes wide with disbelief. The victor's smirk had vanished, replaced by a pale, twitching confusion. This was not part of her script. This was not how the scene was supposed to play out. She had built a narrative of our grandmother as a frail, prejudiced relic, and in one warm, genuine hug, Grandma had demolished it completely. Michael, to his credit, recovered beautifully. He hugged her back gently and said, "It is an absolute honor to meet you, Eleanor. Thank you for having me." The spell was broken. The rest of the family, seeing Grandma's enthusiastic welcome, surged forward. My Uncle Robert was the first, clapping Michael on the back with a booming laugh. "Any friend of Eleanor's is a friend of mine. Good to meet you, son." My Aunt Carol, my cousins, they all followed suit, shaking his hand, introducing themselves. Their initial apprehension washed away by the matriarch's clear approval. Michael was instantly absorbed into the chaotic warmth of the gathering, fielding questions about his job, his family, where he went to school. He handled it all with an easy grace that made my heart ache with love for him. I stood back for a moment, just watching, a dizzying wave of relief washing over me. And then I saw Clara again. She was standing in the corner, near the dining room entrance, her face contorted into a snarl of pure fury. She wasn't looking at Michael anymore. She was looking at me. It was a look of such profound hatred that it momentarily took my breath away. This wasn't just about her being wrong about Grandma. This was something deeper, something personal and venomous. She saw me watching her, and she beckoned with a sharp, angry flick of her head toward the kitchen. I knew I couldn't avoid it. I excused myself and followed her, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. The relief I had felt just moments before evaporated, replaced by a chilling dread. The kitchen was empty. The comforting chaos of dinner preparation momentarily paused. Clara closed the swinging door behind us, plunging us into a tense, isolated quiet. "How could you?" she spat, her voice a venomous whisper. "How could you do this to me?" Her. Not to Grandma, not to the family. To her? The narcissism was breathtaking. "What did I do, Clara?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I brought my boyfriend to Thanksgiving. He was welcomed. End of story. Don't play dumb with me," she shrieked, her voice cracking with rage. "You knew! You did this on purpose to undermine me, to make me look like a fool." She started pacing the length of the kitchen, her hands clenched into tight fists. "I have spent years, managing this family, managing Grandma, keeping everything stable. I protect her. I make the decisions that are best for her, even when she doesn't see it herself. And you just waltz in here with your your project, and you blow everything up." Project. The word hung in the air between us, ugly and dehumanizing. "He's not a project, Clara. He's the man I love. And what do you mean managing Grandma? She seems perfectly capable of managing herself." Clara let out a harsh, barking laugh. "Oh, you are so naive. You have no idea what it takes. The doctors, the finances, the medication. I handle all of it. I've been setting things up, carefully, to ensure she's taken care of for the rest of her life, to ensure her legacy is protected. I have power of attorney. I make the decisions. And her getting agitated, getting worked up over things she doesn't understand, it could jeopardize everything." The pieces started to click into place, forming a picture that was far uglier than simple racism. This wasn't about protecting Grandma's feelings. It was about controlling her environment, It was about keeping her isolated, predictable, and compliant. Jeopardize what, Clara? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What have you been setting up? She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her eyes glittering with a strange fanatical light. A trust, she said, her voice dropping conspiratorially. A tightly controlled trust. To protect her assets from people who might want to take advantage of her. People like him. She jerked her head toward the living room. Gold diggers. People who see a lonely old woman and see a payday. I had it all arranged. The financial advisors. The lawyers. I've been working on this for over a year. A cold dread seeped into my bones. You're putting all of Grandma's assets into a trust that you control? I asked. Does she know about this? Did she agree to it? Clara waved a dismissive hand. She doesn't need to know the details. That's why she has me. I handle the complicated things so she doesn't have to worry. I've been moving assets, consolidating accounts. It's all perfectly legal. I have her signature on everything. She said it with a chilling pride, a gloating satisfaction in her own cleverness. She believed she had already won. She believed she was untouchable. You're stealing from her, I said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. You're isolating her and stealing her money. She laughed again, a sound completely devoid of humor. It's not stealing, you idiot. It's management. It's ensuring that her money goes where it's supposed to go. To family. To the people who have earned it. The people who have been here, taking care of her. Not to some outsider you just brought in off the street. Or to you, for that matter. You, with your history of instability. A judge would take one look at your file and agree that I am the only responsible choice. She was weaponizing my past. The years of therapy for anxiety after our parents' death. The brief period in my early 20s where I drank too much to numb the pain. Things I had worked so hard to overcome. Things I had foolishly confided in my sister about, believing she was my ally. She had been collecting ammunition all along. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, that I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. This woman who I had shared a childhood with, who I thought loved me, saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to be discredited and removed. The kitchen door swung open, and Uncle Robert stood there, a concerned look on his face. Everything all right in here? You two are missing the toast. Clara's face instantly smoothed over, the rage replaced by a saccharine smile. Just catching up, she said brightly. Sister stuff. We'll be right out. Uncle Robert's eyes flickered from her face to mine. He saw something in my expression, a flicker of the horror I was feeling. He nodded slowly. All right then. Don't be long. Eleanor is asking for you, Sarah. He closed the door, leaving us alone again. The interruption seemed to break Clara's momentum. She looked at me, her expression hardening again. This conversation isn't over, she said, her voice a low threat. You brought a storm into this house today, Sarah. And you are going to regret it. She turned and pushed through the door, leaving me alone in the sudden silence of the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, my legs shaking so badly I thought I might collapse. The smell of turkey was nauseating now. The happy sounds from the living room felt like they were coming from a different planet. My family wasn't just dysfunctional, it was dangerous. And my sister was the monster at the center of it. I splashed some cold water on my face from the kitchen sink, took a few deep breaths, and tried to pull myself together. I couldn't fall apart. Not now. I had to get through this dinner. I had to protect Grandma. I walked back into the living room, pasting a smile on my face that felt brittle and thin. Michael saw me immediately, and his own smile faltered. He excused himself from a conversation with my cousin and came to my side. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. I shook my head slightly. Later, I mouthed. Just stay close. He nodded, his expression serious, and put a protective arm around my shoulders. His solid presence was the only thing keeping me upright. The rest of the dinner was a surreal performance. I sat between Michael and Grandma, participating in conversations, laughing at jokes, passing the mashed potatoes, all while a silent war was being waged across the table. Clara sat directly opposite me, her eyes like chips of ice. Every time I looked up, she was staring at me, a look of cold promise in her eyes. She was a gracious hostess to everyone else, but to me, she was a predator, watching her prey. Grandma, oblivious to the undercurrents, was having the time of her life. She was enchanted by Michael, peppering him with questions about his work as an architect, his love for jazz, his childhood in Chicago. She patted his hand frequently and laughed at all his jokes. It was the most animated and happy I had seen her in years, and every laugh, every smile she shared with him was another turn of the screw for Clara. As we were getting ready to leave, packing up plates of leftovers, Grandma pulled me aside into the quiet of the hallway. She took both of my hands in hers. "He's a good man, Sarah," she said softly. "A kind man. You can see it in his eyes." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I'm so glad you like him, Grandma." I was worried. She squeezed my hands. "Because of what Clara said?" My head snapped up. "You knew?" She gave me a sad, knowing smile. "Oh, honey, I'm old, not deaf. Clara has been telling me for weeks how unsuitable your new boyfriend was, how I would be uncomfortable. She has a lot of ideas about what's best for me. Too many ideas." A wave of shame washed over me. I almost hadn't come. I almost let Clara's lies keep me away, keep Michael away. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I should have." She cut me off gently. "You did the right thing. You brought him. You trusted me. That's what matters." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But you need to be careful with your sister, Sarah. She's gotten strange. Controlling. She talks about my money like it's already hers. Your Uncle Robert is worried too. We haven't known what to do." It was the confirmation I needed. I wasn't crazy. This wasn't just my perception. Grandma saw it too. She was scared. The drive home was a stark contrast to the drive there. The silence was heavy, but it was a shared silence now, not an anxious one. I told Michael everything. Every poisonous word Clara had said in the kitchen. The trust, the power of attorney, the threats, the way she had been manipulating and isolating our grandmother. He listened patiently, his hands tightening on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the asphalt. "Okay," he said finally, his voice calm and measured. "Okay. This is bad. This is worse than a family squabble. This is potential felony territory. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud." The clinical, legal terms made it sound even more terrifying. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice small. "The first thing we do tomorrow morning is call a lawyer," he said, his tone firm. "Not just any lawyer. An elder law attorney. The best one we can find. The second thing is, you start writing everything down. Every conversation, every text, every email you can find from Clara for the past few years that shows her trying to control you or your grandmother. We need a timeline. We need documentation." That night, sleep was impossible. My mind was a chaotic storm of betrayal and fear. Every memory of my sister was now tainted, recontextualized through the lens of her confession, her offers to help Grandma with her bills, her insistence on being the sole point of contact for Grandma's doctors, her little comments about my own fragility. It had all been part of a long, patient, and utterly ruthless campaign. I got out of bed and went to my laptop. I started a new document and began to write. I scrolled back through years of text messages, my stomach churning. "Don't bother Grandma today. She's not feeling well. I took care of that bill for her. Don't worry about it. Are you sure you're stable enough to handle that responsibility, Sarah? Remember last time. It was all there. A pattern of control, isolation, and gaslighting. So subtle I had never seen it as a whole. Until now." The next morning, Michael was already on the phone when I woke up. He had gotten a recommendation from a colleague at his firm. A woman named Evelyn Reed, a bulldog of an attorney who specialized in cases of financial elder abuse. We had an appointment for the following afternoon. I spent the day compiling my timeline, my notes growing into a multi-page document of Clara's insidious influence. It was a painful, nauseating process, like performing an autopsy on my own family. Each memory I transcribed felt like a fresh cut. Evelyn Reed's office was sparse and modern, all glass and steel. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to my story without interruption, her expression unreadable. I handed her the timeline I had created. She read through it, her brow furrowed in concentration. When she was done, she looked up at me. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than professional detachment. It was a kind of grim recognition. "I've seen this story 100 times," she said, her voice dry. "The dutiful child who isolates a parent, gains financial control, and then systematically drains them dry while painting anyone who questions them as greedy or unstable. She laid out our options. We could report it to Adult Protective Services and the police, but criminal cases were hard to prove. The burden of proof for intent to defraud was very high, especially when Clara had power of attorney and, as she claimed, Grandma's signatures on everything. The more effective route, Evelyn explained, was a civil action. We could file a petition with the probate court to have Clara's power of attorney revoked and demand a full accounting of our grandmother's finances. We could request an independent guardian be appointed to oversee her affairs. It will be a fight, Evelyn warned. She will fight back, and she will fight dirty. She will use your personal history against you. Are you prepared for that? I looked at Michael, who gave me a firm nod. I thought of Grandma's whispered plea in the hallway. Yes, I said. I am. The first shot was fired 2 weeks later. I was served with papers at my apartment. Clara was suing me. She was petitioning the court for a restraining order, to keep me away from Grandma. The petition was a work of fiction, a masterpiece of character assassination. It painted me as a mentally unstable, manipulative daughter who was trying to coerce her vulnerable grandmother into changing her will. It cited my history of anxiety, twisting my therapy into evidence of my unbalanced mind. It claimed Michael was a fortune hunter with a criminal record. A blatant lie, easily disproven, but damaging nonetheless. It was designed to shock, to wound, and to make me back down. It almost worked. Reading those pages, filled with twisted half-truths and outright lies, felt like being physically assaulted. I spent a night curled up on the sofa, crying, convinced that she would win, that she would successfully paint me as the villain, and I would lose my grandmother forever. This was my rock-bottom crisis. I felt the old, familiar pull of despair, the urge to just give up, to let the darkness swallow me. Michael sat with me all night, holding me, not offering empty platitudes, but just being there. "This is what she does, Sarah," he said, his voice a low anchor in my storm. "She finds your weakest point and presses down with all her might. This is a tactic. It's designed to make you quit. Don't let her win." His words, and the memory of Grandma's trust in me, pulled me back from the edge. The next day, I was back in Evelyn's office, the petition in my hand. My fear had been burned away, leaving behind a hard, cold resolve. Evelyn read the petition with a grim smile. "Standard, scorched earth tactic," she said. "She's trying to get you on the defensive. We'll file our response, and we'll file our own petition to have her removed as POA. Now, we need to dig. We need to find the proof that her management is actually theft." The investigation began in earnest. Evelyn hired a forensic accountant named David Chen. Uncle Robert, horrified by what was happening, flew in from his home in Oregon and offered to pay for the legal and accounting fees. He became our staunchest ally, providing a sworn affidavit about Clara's years-long campaign to alienate him from his own mother. David Chen started by subpoenaing bank records, credit card statements, and investment portfolios going back 5 years. The process was agonizingly slow. Weeks turned into months. Clara's lawyer filed motion after motion to delay, to block our requests for documents. It was a war of attrition, designed to drain our resources and our morale. During this time, Clara consolidated her control over Grandma. She changed the landline number, citing harassing phone calls. She fired Grandma's longtime caregiver and hired a new one from an agency loyal to her. My calls went unanswered. My visits were blocked at the door by the new caregiver, a stern woman who would parrot the line, "Eleanor is resting and cannot be disturbed." I was effectively cut off. The isolation was terrifying. I had no way of knowing if Grandma was okay, if she knew we were fighting for her, or if Clara was poisoning her mind against me. The pressure from the rest of the family was immense. Aunts and cousins who had been friendly at Thanksgiving now called me, their voices filled with concern that was clearly fed to them by Clara. "Are you sure you know what you're doing, Sarah? Clara is just trying to protect her. This legal battle is going to drain all of Eleanor's money. You're tearing this family apart." Each call was a fresh wave of doubt, a new attempt to make me feel like the aggressor. I learned to screen my calls. My world shrank to Michael, Uncle Robert, and my therapist, who became my lifeline. In our weekly sessions, I learned to separate Clara's voice in my head from my own, to validate my own reality, and to find grounding techniques for the inevitable court appearances. Then, we got our first breakthrough. David Chen, the forensic accountant, called us in for a meeting. He had a stack of spreadsheets in front of him. "I found it," he said. a note of excitement in his voice. It's a classic shell game. She's not just taking money out. She's been taking out loans in your grandmother's name. He pointed to a line item. A home equity line of credit, taken out 18 months prior, for $200,000. The money had been transferred from Grandma's account to a newly formed LLC. The sole owner of the LLC? Clara. She's been using the money for a down payment on a new condo, a new car, luxury vacations. She's been paying the minimums on the loan from your grandmother's checking account, so it wouldn't raise red flags. But it's blatant fraud. It was the evidentiary turning point. It was concrete. It was undeniable. It was the weapon we needed. Evelyn immediately filed a motion for an emergency hearing to suspend Clara's power of attorney and appoint a temporary conservator for Grandma's estate. The judge, seeing the evidence of the loan, granted it. Clara was, for the moment, legally powerless. The next step was a full evidentiary hearing to make the arrangement permanent and to force Clara to account for the missing money. The victory was short-lived. A week later, Grandma had a fall. The new caregiver called Clara first, who then waited 3 hours before calling an ambulance. Grandma was hospitalized with a broken hip and a severe concussion. The doctor said the delay in treatment had caused complications. It was a clear, malicious act of negligence. Clara had used our mother's health as a weapon. The rage I felt was so pure and so intense it was incandescent. The fight was no longer just about money. It was about saving my grandmother's life. The hearing was scheduled for 2 months later. In the interim, the court-appointed guardian, a kind but firm woman named Mrs. Gable, took control. She immediately fired Clara's caregiver and allowed me and Uncle Robert full access to Grandma in the rehab facility. Seeing her was a shock. She was frail, confused, and her memory was foggy from the concussion. But when she saw me, her eyes cleared for a moment. "Sarah," she whispered, gripping my hand. She left me on the floor. It was all she could say, but it was enough. It was everything. The day of the hearing felt like my own execution. I was going to have to get on the stand and testify against my own sister. I was going to have to relive every moment of her betrayal, and I knew her lawyer would try to rip me to shreds. I sat in the witness box, my heart pounding against my ribs. I looked out at the courtroom. Michael and Uncle Robert sat in the front row, their faces set with determination. Across the aisle, Clara sat beside her lawyer, looking cool and composed, as if this were all just a tiresome business meeting. My testimony, guided by Evelyn, was straightforward. I recounted the Thanksgiving conversation, the threats, the pattern of isolation. I explained my past struggles with anxiety and how Clara had used them against me. I spoke about finding the fraudulent loan. When it was her lawyer's turn to cross-examine, he came at me with everything he had. He was slick, condescending, and brutal. He brought up my past, my therapy, my drinking in my early 20s. He tried to paint me as an unstable, jealous sister, lashing out because Clara was the responsible one. "Isn't it true, Miss Evans, that you have a history of emotional outbursts?" he asked, his voice dripping with insinuation. I took a deep breath. Just like my therapist had taught me. I focused on a spot on the wall behind his head. "I have a history of anxiety, which I have managed with therapy. It doesn't have any bearing on my sister taking out a $200,000 loan in my grandmother's name." He tried to twist my words, to trap me in contradictions, but I held firm. I stuck to the facts. I refused to let him rattle me. I looked at the judge, a stern-faced woman who watched the proceedings with an eagle eye, and I told the truth. The most powerful evidence came from David Chen, who calmly and methodically walked the court through the labyrinth of financial records, showing exactly how Clara had siphoned the money. And then came the final witness. The first caregiver, the one Clara had fired. A woman named Maria. We had found her living 2 towns over. She was terrified to testify, but her conscience wouldn't let her stay silent. She told the court how Clara had instructed her to limit Grandma's phone calls, how she had seen Clara bully and berate her mother, how Clara would get her to sign documents she clearly didn't understand. Her testimony was quiet, dignified, and utterly devastating to Clara's case. When Clara took the stand, her composure finally cracked. Under Evelyn's relentless, precise questioning, her story began to fall apart. The cool, capable caretaker dissolved into a defensive, snarling mess. When presented with the bank statements showing the transfers to her LLC, she claimed they were repayments for expenses. When asked to produce receipts for those expenses, she couldn't. She began to contradict herself, her lies tangling into an incoherent knot. She shot me a look of pure venom from the witness stand, a look that told me everything I needed to know. She was not a victim. She was a predator who had been caught. The judge delivered her ruling a week later. It was a complete victory. Clara's power of attorney was permanently revoked. She was ordered to pay back the full $200,000, plus interest and our legal fees. A permanent restraining order was put in place, prohibiting her from coming within 500 feet of Grandma or having any contact with her. The judge's words were scathing. She called Clara's actions a profound and calculated betrayal of trust, and a despicable act of elder exploitation. I sat there, listening, and felt not triumph, but a vast, hollow emptiness. We had won, but the cost had been my entire family. It was a bittersweet verdict. We had saved Grandma and her finances, but the D.A. declined to press criminal charges. Without Grandma being able to give a clear, consistent testimony due to her concussion, they felt a conviction would be unlikely. Clara would never see the inside of a jail cell for what she did. She would have to pay back the money, but she would walk away a free woman. That part felt like an injustice, a wound that would never quite close. I had to learn to live with the fact that sometimes the justice you get is incomplete. The aftermath was a long, slow process of rebuilding. Grandma came to live with me and Michael after she was released from rehab. Her short-term memory was damaged, but her long-term memory, her spirit, was still there. Some days she was lucid and funny, her old self. Other days she was confused, asking for people who had been gone for years. Caring for her was difficult, but it was also a gift. It was a chance to reclaim the relationship that Clara had tried to steal from us. Uncle Robert helped us set up a proper trust, managed by a neutral third party, to ensure her needs would be met for the rest of her life. I continued with therapy, processing the trauma and the grief. Grief for the sister I thought I had, and the family that was now shattered beyond repair. I had to establish firm, permanent boundaries. I blocked Clara's number, her email, her social media. I sent a clear message to any relatives who still defended her or urged me to forgive and forget that they were choosing her side, and they would no longer be a part of my life. My world became smaller, but it was safer. It was real. My relationship with Michael deepened into something I had never thought possible. He had stood by me through the ugliest, most difficult year of my life. He had seen me at my absolute worst and had never wavered. He was my family now, in a way that was more profound than blood. We were building a new life, a new definition of family, based not on obligation, but on love, trust, and mutual respect. A year later, it was Thanksgiving again. The table was much smaller this time. It was just me, Michael, Grandma, and Uncle Robert, who had flown in for the holiday. There was no tension, no undercurrent of malice. The house was filled with the easy sound of laughter and the smell of a turkey that Michael and I had cooked together. Grandma sat at the head of the table, a paper crown from a Christmas cracker perched jauntily on her head. She was having a good day. She raised her glass of sparkling cider. "A toast," she said, her voice a little shaky but clear. "To family. The real kind." We all raised our glasses. I looked across the table at Michael, at my uncle, at my grandmother, and I felt a sense of peace that I thought I had lost forever. The scars were still there, a faint, pale network beneath the surface. They always would be. But they were a reminder not just of the wound, but of the fact that I had survived it. I was a survivor, and for the first time in a long time, I was truly, deeply thankful.